Introductory note. Elizabeth Barrett Browning, an English poet, born in Durham, March 6, 1806, died at Florence, Italy, June 30, 1861. Her father was an eminent physician, under whose care, and that of H.S. Boyd, the blind teacher and author of select passages from the Greek Fathers, she was carefully educated. Her education was that of a boy rather than that which is usually bestowed upon girls, and the great Greek Fathers of the Church were her special favorites. Elizabeth Barrett, we are told, wrote for periodicals when she was only 10 years old. At the age of 16 she published her first book, an essay on mind, and other poems. This was followed 7 years later by another volume, which contained, among other things, a translation of the Prometheus Bound of Aeschylus. In 1837, when she was 31, she became an invalid. After a year at her father's house in London, her physicians, as winter approached, ordered her to a milder climate. In company with her eldest brother and other relatives she went to Torquay, on the Devonshire coast of England. Here occurred an event which deeply colored her future life. Nearly 12 months had passed when, on one fine summer morning, her favorite brother, together with 2 other young men, his friends, died in a boating accident. It seemed that the shock of this catastrophe would prove fatal to Elizabeth Barrett. It was nearly a year before she could be removed to her father's house in London, and then only in an invalid carriage, and by journeys of 20 miles a day. Returning at length to London, her life for some 8 years was that of an apparently hopeless invalid, confined to one large but darkened chamber, admitting only her own family and a few intimate friends, but reading almost every book worth reading, in almost every language, and giving herself, heart and soul, to that poetry of which she seemed born to be the priestess. Her chosen companions were a Hebrew Bible, a shelf full of large print Greek books, and no small range of polyglot reading. In study and composition she sought relief from the weariness of her sick couch. In 1838 she published a small volume entitled The Seraphim and Other Poems. This was soon followed by the Drama of Exile. In 1844 was published a collected edition of her poems, in 2 volumes, with a touching dedication to her father. This collection contained all that she had published which she thought worthy of preservation. Among the new poems in these volumes was Lady Geraldine's Courtship, perhaps the most widely read of all those Elizabeth Barrett, in which the name of another English poet, Robert Browning, was mentioned in admiration. As the story is told, Browning, who was personally a stranger to her, called to render his thanks for the compliment. A mutual attachment grew up, and in 2 years, in the autumn of 1846, they were married. Never was there a more happy union than that of Robert Browning and Elizabeth Barrett. She rose from her invalid couch to receive the wedding ring upon her finger, but from that day her health began sensibly to improve, and during most of the remaining 15 years of her life she was a fairly healthy, though always fragile woman. Soon after their marriage the Brownings took up their residence at Florence, which, with the exception of occasional returns to England, continued to be their home. Shortly after her marriage, perhaps in part even before it, Mrs. Browning wrote a poem, which was first published, with others, in 1850, in the second collected edition of her poems. This poem consists of 42 stanzas, in the form of sonnets, and is entitled Sonnets from the Portuguese, but one would vainly look for any Portuguese sonnets at all like them. They are truly Mrs. Browning's record of that love life which, beginning when she had reached the age of 35, warmer grew and tenderer to the last, until her death at 52.